What's up guys, it is that Panda again here again with another video, and I'm a bit late on this one this time around, and the reason guys, my power was out. Okay, it's been storming here, it's kind of like the streets are a little like low-key flooded. I wouldn't say they're actually flooded, but they're low-key flooded. Okay, either way, I was looking through like the brackets for this island, and I'm kind of like I'm just like in a weird spot because I think like this might be one of the weirdest and worst matchmaking I've seen, at least in this island format so far. And I mean, like it's kind of a given, since I think like everybody kind of can come to the conclusion that the top brackets are all kind of handpicked and handmade, or at least like I think they're intentionally keeping the whales apart from each other right now, or at least like the main majority. Maybe give them an island apart, let them kind of enjoy themselves, maybe let them just feel like victors while they kind of crush in their brackets, and maybe that's kind of the intention. I'm not really sure. That's kind of what it seems like. So we'll hop into G1 and we'll just talk about everything. So G1, we're gonna be looking. Uh, Honestly, I was a little bit conflicted because I came in right away and I was like, well, ROK, there's no other, because I think when you think of Mega Whale Alliances, you think of ROK, you think of HMB, you think of DHX, and you think of Boon. And I don't think there's any other groups you really think of. I think there's obviously other really big groups, but I don't think like they're really the top tippity top groups, right? That you think of right away when you think of like these crazy whale groups, because these crazy whale groups have a ton of just insane either mega whales, or they just have a really high T6 player base, and that T6 player base is able to make them really excel, be it in like field dominance and all that kind of stuff. Like like having multiple players at like the scale of these ROK guys is absolutely insane. Like there's quite a few of them, and they're able to just kind of go ham together on the field and being able to coordinate like that. Just insane. But I was looking at their Legion, right? And you have Glow, and no offense to Glow, but this is like I feel like this kind of happens a lot, especially in these Mega Whale regions. Well, you'll have like a second or third secondary alliance or third alliance in here, and you look at their kills and you look at their might and you look at their ID, and you can kind of just tell a lot of these groups aren't fighting, right? Like these guys are from Region 16. Region 16 in themselves, like they have HMB, and that's why they're like kind of really well known. I'm not sure if these are all just alts or what they are, but I wouldn't really find Glow here to be the most reliable ally. So that 6 billion might is kind of iffy, right? It's kind of iffy, and like if it'll actually be any of assistance, it's kind of hard to tell. Then you have SLGS, and I think SLGS kind of has been really helpful in a lot of these brackets. I think they've gotten really lucky with, allying with, they've been in Legions with like HMB twice, I think, so far. And honestly, that's really good luck because, I mean, you might think, oh, well, they'd be luckier if they weren't in this bracket at all. And while that's true, you got to consider these other alliances. For example, when you've had let's say Boon versus HMB, right? You have those other alliances on the side. SLGS could have ended up on one of those sides, but they still haven't, and they've still been kind of paired up with ROK in this case. And the like reason I say this is, even if they lose, for example, they're kind of put into just a really good situation to where even if they lose, they're going to be taking really good fights, they're going to be taking really good trades, and they're fighting with a really strong group, like ROK, right? So even if they have to, let's say, rally a tower, they have this guy, or they have whoever maybe has the strongest armaments in their group, and that means that they're going to be taking potentially some of the best trades you can kind of expect, you know what I mean? So just in general, I think that this is like very favorable for SLGS and multiple times. And unlike Glow, I think SLGS might be very helpful because I think SLGS personally is a pretty good fighter group, and that is like a really big upside here. Now to continue off where we were kind of going, we look at OXO, we look at Mink and all these type of groups, and I find this kind of complicated because you can argue that, for example, if you look at Mink, they have Jenny, right? Jenny Smash, and honestly don't know how active this guy is. I'm not sure how much I see him in the fight, and that might be one of my main issues. And if, let's say, just say he is very active, let's say he's on every single garrison that needs to be defended, let's say he's every single rally captain, so even if, worst comes to worst, they're not able to hold multiple towers, they are able to do like a 1v1 on towers, they are able to do a 1v1 with rallies, and they have maybe their potentially best, strongest garrison captain right here, best, strongest rally captain right here, and their whole legion with maxed out gear, potentially really good parts, armaments. The issue that I have here is even if this guy is very active, it's like I think there's like an effect that kind of happens when you face these mega whale groups where even if your legion, let's say your legion overall has a stronger fighting power, has a lot more players, the issue is you're fighting such a insane group that has like because you can have these legions both 14 billion, right? It won't matter. And I mean, obviously, this Legion's stronger. But at the end of the day, does that really matter when you kind of fight a group like ROK who has these insane mega whales? You can have 100 million player versus another 100 million player. But if that 100 million player has 20 trillion resources in his bags, 5 years of speed ups in his bags, what the heck are you supposed to do? You know what I mean? That's kind of the situation I think some of these other groups are faced with. And I think you're also just kind of discouraged going into this, and you're like, I think a lot of people go in with their heads down and they're like, yeah, there's no chance here. And I think a lot of people just aren't willing to kind of come into a fight like this. So one thing I really question is even if these groups are strong enough to put up a fight or work together and put up a fight, it's like how efficient are they really going to be, or how much help are they really going to be? And this is honestly where I kind of think like there are some situations where some legions should or need to have the ability to 3v1, right? And I think that's kind of a necessary thing in G1. And you might actually think that's overkill, kind of considering all the alliances here. But I'd honestly say it's not overkill, kind of considering how much fighting power a group like ROK has, be it the field and just overall their armaments and their, garrison captains and all that kind of stuff, which will just make their trades overall better. Next, you have red here, and I will say, or sorry, crimson. I will say from what I've heard from somebody is that golden and crimson are actually going to be allied together. But even then, let's say crimson isn't their ally. Honestly, don't know how much help these, crimson is against them, right? Like I know they have Deathlock and all that, which to be fair, Deathlock and them are really strong. They have some insane gear. You have I think Walker here as well and stuff. And one of my biggest issues is I honestly don't know how much they show up in these like mega whale brackets, you know what I mean? So if they had to fight against ROK or something, I'm not sure if they'd really show much, and I'm not sure if they'd be like willing to fight, if they'd be willing to be garrison captain. And that's one of my big issues about this. So even if it was a 3v1, I'm kind of questioning how effective it'd be. And last off, we're looking at Jade, and I think Jade is honestly coming in with, I would say their odds aren't the best. I would say honestly they're still fighting in an uphill battle, but given LAS and S1ND, I'd say that they honestly have been put into really favorable circumstances. Even this group right here, WTO1, like this is I would call them a pretty strong group. Even look at the gear, right? Like not only are we going to be looking at the gear for each of these groups, they just have some insane fighters. Like look at this guy. And I mean, like you can look through their players. I think these are honestly really solid groups that just haven't been put into these brackets yet. And I've kind of talked about them a few times. I think I've talked about a few of these groups, and I've just been like, yeah, these groups are insane. They have some insane fighters. I think they just lack the overall T6 player base, and that could be their only problem. I think that field control is going to be the one biggest issue here, and potentially just like how good their armaments are really going to be what decides, makes and breaks, like how well they do. I will say I've actually played with this guy before, and like gears and everything, right? You gotta understand armaments now play such a huge role. And this dude's armaments, I swear, I think they're nearly maxed out. I think his armaments are nearly maxed out, and I'm sure there's a few guys in LAS who are like that. And it's kind of probably the same with S1ND. 13 billion group, that's a pretty big group, honestly. Maybe on one of the mega whale groups at this point, or kind of getting there. But like it's so hard to determine just based off this. Like I wish there was a way we could like evaluate all their armaments. But honestly, I've watched some of these groups in play, and I think these groups are honestly really big and really well built. But I think the biggest issue that they're gonna face is like I said, it's a group like ROK. They have multiple players who have just insane maxed out parts, probably maxed out armaments, and I don't know, man. I think one of the biggest issues is going to be field control. That'll be like their biggest issue kind of coming into this. I honestly think as Jade, my best shot would maybe be going towards these checkpoints. And if I go to these checkpoints, I might actually just play defensive. I might not even go up mid. I might just try to play defensive on checkpoints, and I would force these teams to kind of push us, and we'd take the biggest stance that we could and maybe just sit on checkpoints. I know it's kind of a wussy move to do, but honestly, it's probably the most intelligent move for them to kind of do, and I think playing back like that could give them the best chance to optimize their trades. optimize how much they're actually losing on like how many bases get zeroed, because I think if it comes down to like let's say connecting to 20 towers, they're not gonna be able to defend every tower. I know I kind of like stayed on those guys for 10 minutes. Okay, I'll be shortening this video. I'm not gonna be going through every bracket because I just think that there's I don't know, man. I think it's much harder to kind of cover a lot of these brackets now, especially compared to Island, where there's multiple alliances in a legion, and that kind of like determines how good or bad a legion is. But G2, I think G2 is going to be the most eventful one. I think the other brackets are not so, not as much so. G1 could be eventful. It really depends on Jade, I think. But let's hop into G2. So G2 is very dependent on, I think, their allies, right? And that's kind of always the case now. So we got Golden, which is DHX's Legion, and then we have Jade, which is H&B's Legion. I'll kind of talk about the up and downsides I see here. So I will say right off the bat, we have R4W, and R4W, I've always actually really liked these guys. And one reason that I actually like these guys is they're just a really good group, especially for their size, especially for their spending scale. And I think having a group like that is massive for DHX. I feel like these guys are going to be really good at filling towers, really good at filling rallies, and potentially even helping on the field, even if they aren't all T6 players. I think they just have a really good player base, like a number-wise and stuff, and they might be a big help in that case. I will say H&B does have this team. I'm not really sure how strong this team is. I'm not really sure how big of fighters these guys are, but, they also have UA29. One big upside I will say for H&B here though is I saw Dev B, for example, and Dev B, although I'm not sure if they're gonna like number wise as like active as R4W, I will say they have someone like Landshark, right? And one of the biggest upsides for this is their Legion can launch 2 rallies at once, right? Whereas I think this Legion could launch multiple rallies, but the issue is you got to understand there's just a big discrepancy in like gear, you know what I mean? And I don't think like these other alliances outside of DHX has that gear. And next we're going to be talking about Crimson and Azure. So what I'm going to be assuming is going to be the case, I'm assuming that Azure is going to go towards Golden, so it's likely that Azure is going to ally with Golden, and we're probably going to have Crimson ally with H&B, and the reason is just BTW here is a H&B kind of family. And we can look through BTW. I will say like biggest upside for BTW is probably LeBron. Like I think that this dude just has some really good gear. I'm not sure about the rest of the guys, like gear wise or rally wise. I feel like that's one of their biggest maybe downfalls as such a big group. They just lack the complete mega whales with like jacked out of this world, their gear. I'm not really sure about their allies, honestly. I don't know if I checked them out. Like, I will say, like, these alliances are pretty big here. I don't know how big of an impact they're going to be, because I will say, I think Azure can be helpful, but it really depends how willing these groups are to fight. And I think depending on, like, I don't know. I think Crimson and Azure are really going to have to be sandbags, because it's going to be kind of hard for like a group like Azure, for example, to come all the way around, because you could assume that you want like Azure to hold down Crimson, but that's kind of hard when you're wrapping around in this case, right? And it's kind of hard to go all the way across to fight Crimson. So I feel like DHX is going to be Crimson is probably going to be using themselves as sandbags, maybe against Golden to kind of burn them out, waste some of their resources, waste some of their troops. Same with Jade. I think if Azure is really willing to help in this fight, that could be the determining factor for how well Gold is kind of able to fight at mid here, and if they are able to kind of get through. Because like I said, I think they'd have to be sandbags. But the issue is I kind of looked through Azure, and unlike Crimson, I don't think that they have the mega whales, and I think that's something that I heard from Fox or whatever. Like I don't know if they have the gear to kind of compete against a group like H&B, if they can kind of really take positive trades on a tower or even remotely positive. And that's usually one of the biggest falls off in these groups. One of the biggest fall offs in these groups. I think that they kind of need those jacked out like players who are able to make their trades better. If you don't have those players, you're kind of in a really rough spot. But yeah, we're going to look at G3 now. I'm not sure how many brackets I'm going to do. Maybe I'll stop at G5 this time around. And yeah, so we have Golden, which is Boone. Boone, 18 billion-ish. We have these other groups in our Legion. I'm not sure how useful LSS1 is going to be. AXE, I honestly think it's kind of I think it's kind of OP to give us a group like this. I think they could have given us two maybe deadish alliances or two farm alliances, right? And this still would have been kind of unfair just because Boone is such a big group. Like, and I think people just understand that, right? And Axe or whatever, these guys are a pretty strong looking group, right? Like for a group at 7 billion might, it just doesn't look like a group I'd want to fight, especially with like I don't know their player base. A lot of these guys are just like fighters, and it's always more threatening to see a group like this because I feel like there's so many groups that are maybe 7 billion, 6 billion might, and you have a lot of T6 players, but a lot of those T6 players just aren't fighters, and that's usually one of the biggest kind of downsides. And I mean, you look around this bracket, you have Crimson. I mean, you can look through these alliances, right? But there's no like mega whales. There's no like insane whale base that can kind of combat them on the field. And I think this is kind of a similar situation at G1, except on a lesser scale, where they just don't have the numbers. They don't have the players to like combat on the field. I just don't see that being the case. Also, I think Azure's also in a rough spot here because I know that SMHS. And I don't know if you guys know, but I've had history with them. And SMHS backstabbed us. SMHS also backstabbed AC-18, and if you guys don't know, Boone has a lot of AC-18 players, and I just can't imagine that they'd be willing to compromise and work with SMHS, kind of considering the past history there is. So I don't really see Azure getting out of this. I don't really see there being a positive upside here. I know there's also like bad blood with Indy 21. I'm not really sure how that works or where the bad blood comes from. I'm not sure about Crimson, but from what I heard, there is going to be an alliance between Jade and Golden, which does kind of work out for me, or not work out for me, but just works out of my head. Because if you guys didn't know, obviously Lion and Boone kind of worked together previously, so it already made sense that there would be kind of more friendly relationships there. It's just gonna be kind of hard to ally together. I think either Jade doesn't capture a East Bay Tower, and then maybe like Golden captures both of them or something, or I don't understand how that would work. Maybe they just avoid capturing the level 7 and they let somebody else capture it. I don't know, man. I don't really know how that's going to work. It's going to be kind of hard to get on a similar legion with them. You got to like really pull the strings for these two type of teams, and it's really hard, you know what I mean? But overall, I just think that this bracket's kind of scuffed. I think like everybody who looked at it could kind of tell, and yeah, that's kind of rough. So we got G4 here. I think there's semi-balance here. We have HAO, right? And I think most people already know HAO as a really strong group. You got MK here. MK, really strong guy. You have, where is he? Noble. I love Noble. I don't know why my PC, my like avatars hate loading. It just always does that. But we got HAO, right? And we got some of these other groups. And I will say like one of the biggest like downsides might be having players with really jacked out gear, and I think that's always the case. You know what I mean? I think like people don't understand. Although like it's more favorable for some of these alliances. I don't think all these alliances like really always like unfair matchmaking, especially if it's like super skewed, like in G3 for example. I doubt a lot of those legions will actually be willing to fight, and maybe they will, but in a lot of cases these groups just aren't willing to fight because they're like, yeah, this is completely unfair, I'm not going to feed my troops away. And that in itself hurts these well alliances, right? Like a lot of these well alliances just aren't happy with unfair matchmaking either. Like people might think, oh, they're probably happy with this. They're probably not, you know what I mean? And I mean, in some cases, they probably are more happy than, like, obviously the legions being suppressed by unfair matchmaking. But just in general, it's not always a good thing just for that legion. I will say, like, this bracket isn't completely skewed. Like, you do have some really strong players like Punisher here. You have Tada. Okay, we have some really strong players, so it's not like it's completely skewed. I'm not sure how good they'll be against like a group like HAO. Like I'm not sure how strong HAO's field presence is. From what I've heard, they just are a really strong group. They've got really good maybe coordination and stuff. I'm just not overall like I'm not overall like sure how this honestly could go. I think that his bracket's honestly not that bad. And even with the gear discrepancy, I've honestly like even in MBD, right? I keep thinking like I don't know why I'm thinking of a different group. We have like I think this group's a pretty good group of fighters, and you can't see there's the gear difference, but I've seen Z's armaments, right? Like Z has some insane armaments for his might and for what you see on the surface here. So there are some people who kind of just like have insane armaments, right? And they have maybe like mediocre gear. And I say mediocre, it's not actually bad. It's just like when you kind of consider like whale status, you think of like maybe like all red or all like maxed out like gear. Like this actually isn't bad. It's just, kind of on a whale scale. It's kind of hard to say he like matches up with someone like MK, you know what I mean? And obviously he wouldn't match up with MK because MK is a crazy whale. But I don't know, man. It really depends how these teams are willing to like sacrifice losses and stuff. That's always how it goes. I don't really like have a good way to like determine how much these teams are willing to lose. Also, I don't know why it does this. Like sometimes legions don't show up, and you know what you have to do? You have to go into you actually have to like manually go, because I think I already went and like I clicked on like the go thing here, but you have to like manually go to the bracket thing right here, and you have to actually hit go in here, and then you can actually see the bracketing. Because if you just go G1, G2, G3, G4, G5, right, you can't actually see like the alliances here. I don't know why it does that. That's such a weird bug. We do have HLUN. I don't know if you guys know that. HLUN. I hadn't seen them forever. I didn't know if they disbanded or something. Yeah, I'm probably gonna stop here. I know I didn't like really give my thoughts on G4 much, by the way. Like I don't really have like a winner I can think of. I definitely would say like the main fighters I would kind of put in like between Jade and Gold. I think the biggest downside here is really gonna be like those mega whales who are able to like run rallies, right? Like no matter what you kind of do, it's kind of hard. Like even though I like upped, I said Z has some insane gear. It's still like it's still there's still a big difference between someone with like a 3 million might hero, for example, and one with like a 5 million, 6 million might hero. You know what I mean? So even with that kind of being said, there's just a big disadvantage. And I already know that like MK from HAO is a very active guy, so being able to kind of catch him offline, or like catch him not being able to run rallies or run garrison captains, is going to be kind of hard. And it's not like he's the only guy with really good gear there, you know what I mean? But I don't know, man. It's really going to depend on like I think strategy, who teams with who there. I think that could go either way, honestly. All right, G5. I feel like I looked a little bit through here, but I don't have like a really good. Okay, we're gonna go through here real quick. INT. Okay, so I already know INT. We got I think it was ANCS migrators here. So honestly, that kind of already puts them at an advantage, because I think they just have some really good fighters plus really good like players with jacked gear. I would say like the biggest issue might be finding players who can kind of combat that. Yeah, I don't know. I recognize this guy from DHX. Yeah, I think that might be the biggest issue in this type of bracket. So I mean, even if like that's like one of the biggest issues, right? Like this is one of those situations where I'm like, a 3v1 might be necessary. You know what I mean? And obviously, like you can't just say one alliance is kind of the determining factor in most brackets, but it's like it's a whole legion, and then if you have like actual alliances in your legion that are fighters, and then maybe in some of the other like brackets you have less fighters and stuff, and like all you need are a lot of these alliances who can crutch off like these whales, you know what I mean? And it kind of just makes these brackets really scuffed. I don't know, like I think the bracketing this time around is really weird. I think it's really scuffed. I feel kind of bad for some of these groups. Like it's just like, what the heck are you supposed to do kind of coming in here? I just don't think they have the gear in this type of bracket to kind of combat a group like ANCS or INT now. But yeah, you guys give me your thoughts. I'm probably gonna end it off there. Like I'm kind of just rushing through this video because I'm a bit late on it now. Like I'm really late on it. Like my power was out, so I just wasn't capable of doing a video earlier. Just you guys give me your thoughts if you guys think this matchmaking was pretty bad this time around. And yeah, I do appreciate you guys. I do hope you guys enjoyed. And like I said, just drop a comment, okay? You guys have a great day or night though, and I will see you guys in the next video. And that is it. Peace out.